Imagine waking up one day and there are no more problems. Nothing worries you. Nothing fails you. Nothing hurts. Your life is perfect. So perfect, in fact, that you no longer know what to live for. The human brain was born to solve problems, but if you take away problems, you take away its purpose. So let's look at the science behind living without problems. I bet we've all dreamed of a life without stress, without pain, without anything that keeps us up at night. But science says that without problems, the brain shuts down, and history proves this better than any theory. Wars forced us to invent modern surgery, pandemics to understand the invisible power of microbes. Economic crises taught us to produce, to save, to plan. Hunger led humankind to cultivate the land, and the fear of death led us to seek meaning in the universe. Everything that makes us strong today was born from a moment when all seemed lost. Comfort never changed the world. Suffering did. Basically, problems are the biological engine of change, the hidden code that pushes humanity to evolve. So today I want to ask you a simple but dangerous question. What would happen if you had no problems at all? Because problems might not be the enemy, but rather the reason we're still alive. If, from one day to the next, you no longer had any problems, your brain would go into crisis. Because the human brain isn't designed for tranquility, but for problem solving. Every goal, every challenge, every minor difficulty triggers a dopamine surge. And that dopamine isn't pleasure, it's direction. It's what tells you you're on the right track. But if there's nothing left to pursue, the dopamine shuts down. And with it, motivation, desire, drive. At first you feel peace, then silence, and then emptiness. Your brain starts searching for something, anything, to pull it out of that calm because, evolutionarily speaking, absolute stability is equivalent to death. Not having problems wouldn't be living, it would only be existing. And that's where the paradox arises. The real problem is not having problems, because without obstacles there is no purpose. Without purpose there is no movement. And without movement there is no life. In fact, several studies show that when people achieve their goals, health, money, or comfort, happiness doesn't increase. It dissolves. The mind reinvents itself, creating new conflicts just to keep functioning. Minor dramas, empty goals, obsessive thoughts. The brain can't stand emptiness, so it creates storms just to feel alive. When the brain invents problems, if you stop fighting against the world, the brain starts fighting against itself. The mind needs conflict. And if it doesn't find it outside, it manufactures it within. This is how fears without cause are born. Anxiety, guilt, the feeling of not being enough. You are programmed to detect threats, but in an environment without real danger, you begin to exaggerate the insignificant. A poorly chosen word, a neutral look, a decision that changes nothing, become internal storms. And the most ironic thing is that these invented problems often hurt more than real ones, because real problems have a solution. Hunger is satisfied, cold is covered, and tiredness is relieved with rest. But the problems the mind invents are intangible. They can't be fixed with actions because they originate from thought itself. Neuroscience confirms this. In the brain, an imagined threat activates the same regions as a real physical threat. The amygdala, the stellate axis, cortisol. In other words, you suffer just the same for something that doesn't exist. Philosophy would say that's the price of consciousness, knowing that you could suffer even for no reason. And we live in this paradox between real and manufactured pain, trying to discern which of the two is killing us more slowly. So yes, the problem with not having problems is that you end up creating your own. And look, having problems isn't bad. In fact, it's the most normal thing that can happen to you. They are proof that you are alive, that something inside you is still trying to move. The brain, the body, and even human history have grown through problems. Without them, there would be no learning, evolution, or purpose. But not all problems are meant to be borne alone. Some are solved with effort, others with time, and a few with help. Because sometimes you don't need to be stronger, just less alone. Not all problems need an immediate solution, but all need to be understood. And perhaps that's the key. Not seeking a life without problems, but a life with the right problems, the ones that push you to grow, not the ones that pointlessly drag you down. So if you're surrounded by chaos, remember that even the brightest mind needs a little push to ignite. Because in the end, problems aren't the end of the road. They're life's way of reminding you that there's still a path to travel. Subscribe.